We're going to call the Human Services meeting to order. Start off with, I need an approval of the agenda. Motion and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We've reached public comment. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. We'll move on to minutes from the August 12th, 2019 meeting. Looking for a motion of approval on those minutes.
Motion approved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move to appointments. Several vacant seats. No applicants, unfortunately. So we'll move on to item C, Lifeway's monthly report. Mary Beth.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So I do have, if I might approach the Commissioners, I have a handout. I was waiting for some additional data from some stakeholders about the millage, a status update with the end of second quarter, if I might approach the board.
A motion to receive?
Motion to receive.
All in favor? Aye. Oppose? Thank you.
Are you welcome? All right, so first thing I'd like to cover is in regards to your report that is in your packet. There are a couple of things that I would like to point out. You will see that there is an update on our strategic plan and where we are with our 4 overarching goals, some moving items that are moving us forward, and you'll see an update about those included in the report. But there are some things, there's been some activity that is important for the county board to be aware of, and that is relative to the jail services. So we have seen a significant need, and you'll see that actually the data supports that on the chart that I just handed out about the millage use for an additional mental health clinician so that there can be one at each one of the jails here in Jackson. And so we hired for that position, and we will be putting one at both locations because of this extensive need. The other thing that was a highlight for our community was the fact that the state actually personally reached out to us. There was this pilot that has been going on in the state with about 8 counties around mental health services in the jails, and we had applied with the county several years ago with the Stepping Up initiative, if you might recall, and we were not selected for that. We did receive some technical assistance from the state to put in some best practice around mental health services in the jail, and they saw the partnership with the community mental health and the local county as a best practice in the state, and we were asked to be a part of a panel last week at the state level with their Juvenile Diversion Summit. So that is a highlight for our community and a success when we look at the mental health millage in Jackson County. The other thing that I wanted to also point out was the fact that because of our work, they also reached out to us about the opportunity for funding from Southeast Michigan Foundation to put into play Medicaid-assisted treatment in the jails. We are going to be a beneficiary of about $350,000 for Jackson County to put in some supports for those with opioid addiction in the jails, and we've been working with the stakeholders at the state and with our local jail to get that implemented, and with Victory Clinic, who will be the primary SUD provider for that. So that's an exciting thing, because as you might recall, when we came to the county, it's probably been about 8 months now, and we presented the data relative to mental health services and needs. One of the things that was really alarming was the fact that there was a significant number of individuals coming to the jail with substance use needs. And that was something we had talked about, was that we needed to find a way to be able to address that need. And so I'm excited about this opportunity for our community and wanted to be sure that the County Commission was aware of that.
Roughly, when's the date that we'll actually see this go into place?
Well, we're trying to get everything in play by October 1st. But it's, right now, we have to submit the actual application. We've already been approved, but it's a matter of submitting the application to the foundation in order to start receiving those funds. But, so if all works out as we're intending, October 1st. The other thing that I wanted to point out, that we were recognized and are going to be part of a panel at the state level, again, relative to best practice, is our efforts at Lifeways around integrated health and our partnership with the FQHC. As you know, that is a strategic goal of Lifeways. We've talked about and I've shared that with the County Commission. And they see us as best practice, again, relative to our partnership with embedding primary care within how we provide behavioral health services. As we look at the renovations that will be occurring with the Lifeways building, one key component of that is the ability to actually transform the space to allow true integration and not just co-location. So that's an exciting opportunity. It's nice that we were recognized in our community for that. In the packet, you'll also, one other thing that I'd like to point your attention to is around, it's on the 3rd page, about halfway down, it says Mid-State Health Network, and it says Mid-State Health Network penetration rates. So what does that mean? And why would that be important for the County Commission to know what that is referring to? We are funded based on our ability to provide services for those with either Medicaid and Healthy Michigan. So they call it penetration. There's a total population of eligible individuals in your community who have Medicaid and Healthy Michigan. The more that you're able to outreach and engage individuals in need of mental health services who have Healthy Michigan and Medicaid, increases your funding level, and that's what that penetration, it says that it means that Lifeways is hitting 4.48% of the population of those with Healthy Michigan, for example. We are above our regional average in both Healthy Michigan and Medicaid, and that's an important thing to note. The other thing included in your packet, we do not yet have an update, which I'm sure you are well aware of, relative to the fiscal year 20 budget at this point in time. We did draft our budget as an agency based on our current fiscal year 19 funding with a projected reduction of potentially 2%. So that is how Lifeways approached our budget planning for fiscal year 20. We will be doing an amended budget once we finally get numbers from the state. The last thing that's included in your report is an update from the National Council around mass shootings, and it is it's a long article. If you're at all interested in reading about, from the behavioral health perspective, around mass violence in the United States, what are some of those things that are contributing? Because unfortunately, one of the alarming messages that we often hear is it's mental illness. That may be a contributing factor, but there are many factors that go into the issue of mass violence in the United States. It does provide opportunities and recommendations about what we can do as a community and as a community mental health organization to address some of those issues and concerns as a community. So enjoyable reading because it's quite long, but very good information. The other thing that you have before you, and I provide this on a quarterly basis to the county, is what does it look like relative to the utilization, provision of mental health services as a result of the millage in Jackson County. So in this flyer, this one page, one of my board members says it's a little busy, but was the feedback from them. But it does provide information relative to all the things that we had talked about with the pursuit of the millage this first fiscal year. We have been able to serve with all of the services over 2,168 individuals with services, not individuals, I'm sorry, with services. We have been able to provide 43 individuals mental health services. We provided 262 individuals in the jail with mental health services. We also have been working with the schools around trauma-informed care and have provided 317 therapy sessions for individuals who do not have insurance around trauma. We implemented our Club Life program for the developmentally disabled, and that was an exciting opportunity to meet the unmet needs for that population. And 17 activities have occurred. It was a slow start. This did not start necessarily January 1st. It took some time to finalize that contract and choose through an RFP process who the provider would be. Club Life is the name of the provider, and they have served 217 individuals since they began. The other thing that we're providing is a community engagement specialist to help navigate and coordinate access to mental health services in the two high-risk schools in our community in Springport and on 4th Street Learning Center. And we did that in partnership with the schools about identifying which schools they felt was most at risk. We also contributed funding to the guardianship services for the CMH population. And then upcoming, so one of the things that's critical that I will be providing to the county, if I have enough time, there's a lot on my plate in September, I would intend on bringing it in October, a proposal for the use of the millage for fiscal year 20. I may not be able to get it to the county board until November, but a couple of the things to note that we will be focusing funding on in fiscal year 2 is around crisis services and the need to really divert individuals out of the emergency department by having the ability to provide services on site at Lifeways 24/7. So that is a critical thing that we've been working with stakeholders on, putting into play. It will include peer supports as well. And the other thing that we're doing is looking at providing mental health training for law enforcement. But that will actually, if all goes as planned, will occur before the end of this fiscal year for Jackson County. So now I will leave it up, that I kind of covered a lot, but I will leave it up to the county commissioners for questions.
Questions?
I do.
Oh, Mr. Overton.
I was just going to make inquiry. For 20, are you guys looking closely at Guardian? There's been some discussion, and there's some feeling, I've heard from folks that many of those folks have, challenges that fit in Lifeway's bailiwick.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're trying to do in partnership with Guardianship Services, when we pursued the millage, it was important that one of the things that we wanted to do was to meet the unmet mental health needs, services in the community. When I pursued the millage, I went and looked at what were the things that we were utilizing local dollars for in prior years that I had the funding to do that I no longer could provide. And one of the things that we were providing, but not a mandate of the community mental health at all, is to support guardianship services. So we did include the level of funding that we funded in the past. I think the challenge relative to funding all of potentially what the Guardian services needs are in Jackson County is we do believe we are an outlier if you look at the data across the state relative to the number of people that we have receiving guardianship services, the length of stay that individuals are in receiving guardianship services. And I think there's an opportunity for us as a community in partnership with guardianship services to evaluate those CNH cases and determine which ones are appropriate for discharge and being able to manage their lives independently. And I think that that will help reduce the costs associated with guardianship services. So we are working right now with them to kind of identify and go through that process. And I think there's an opportunity to have some savings. The other opportunity is to draw down those funds that were set aside. Yes, and so we are supporting them in that effort as well. And that will draw down an additional $90,000. Roughly.
Terrific. It's good to hear because there's obviously a need, and the county proper general fund does not have the resources to do
Right.
that.
And what I just worry about is we committed to the community. It's about mental health services. So I just want to be sure that we do everything we can to support them, but also look at opportunities to create efficiencies within the current program.
Correct. Obviously, it has to fit in with the guidelines of the millage and...
That's correct.
Yep.
That's correct.
Terrific. Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll be moving on to the DHHS quarterly report. I believe Jackie's going to give that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jackie Carafino on behalf of Zoe Lyons from DHHS. You should have in front of you our report. I hope you all have that. I do not have extra copies. Do you have that? Okay, great. Okay, I'm just going to kind of briefly move through this report, and then at the end, any questions you might have for me, I'll do my best to answer. So the ALPAC group that takes place in the community, Advocates and Leaders for Police and Community, just a partnership between the community and law enforcement to work on the relationship there and to address issues that are taking place in our community. One of many, just as an example, shootings that we are frequently dealing with. There's been lots of thoughtful discussion around many issues, and have had something that's come out of that is a small group has been created to determine if there's enough support in the neighborhoods that could be provided after a traumatic event like a shooting to really hone in on the specific area that it's taking place in and providing support to the neighbors and the surrounding area there. We just recently had an expungement fair through the Financial Stability Network. There's a subgroup of the Financial Stability Network that's referred to as decriminalization of poverty. We've had 2 expungement fairs, the most recent one being in August. We had a good turnout there. We had 164 people who attended, and that is obviously to expunge some of the criminal history expunge some incidences off the criminal history for folks so they can move into the workforce. And so we've had a good turnout for both, but did well in August for that, and that's been a success. So you were just speaking about guardianship. Family Services and Children's Aid obviously unable to maintain the contract for guardians. They can't financially sustain our adult guardianship program. Have had support over the past, over the many years, but it's been helpful but not significant enough to sustain that. So they are ending all of the guardianships so they can be fiscally responsible to their other programs, and obviously that causes some concern for us in the human services area, which is not anything new to any of you. I'm sure you're all very aware of that, but just as an update. Jackson County has been selected for anti-racism planning and design task force meeting. We are one of 2 counties, Jackson being one and Kent being the other, and this is primarily Zoe has participated in the design task force based on involvement in trainings and work both locally and statewide, and she was chosen to lead Jackson County in this endeavor, really focusing on issues of race and overrepresentation of children of color that are in the foster care system. And so we're going to be working both locally and statewide in teams to address this particular issue. This has been the case since I started 20 years ago. I'll just say that we've really have been trying to address these issues over time, not effectively. I do think the endeavor that we're working on now has been the most that I've seen over the course of my career, so I'm happy to be part of that, happy to have Jackson leading some of that work to spill out to the other counties across the state of Michigan. So we'll be asking some of our community members to participate in our statewide team, and we'll have a local team in Jackson as well. And we have some help from our central office folks too in this endeavor here locally in Jackson. So we'll be seeing some more updates coming out of that in the near future. Yeah.
What circumstances lead to a child being placed in the foster care system?
Specific to children of color, or are you talking about just in general?
Children.
Okay, so anytime that we have imminent risk of harm that a child is experiencing in their home resulting from abuse or neglect, sometimes the decision is made to seek court intervention to remove the children from their home and place them either with a relative or in a licensed foster care setting. So the children that we have in care, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'll tell you that we sit around 320 to 340, give or take a few each month, depending on cases that close and come in. In Jackson County, we have roughly 300 and some children always in foster care. We've been in the high 200s before, but we this year have stayed in between 300 and 350 at any given time. So just depending on the severity of what's happening in the home, sometimes, and lots of times, I would say we're working with families intensely to bring the risk level of the abuse or the risk level of what they're experiencing in the home down with intensive home services, which is just a plethora of things that we offer families and work with families for. If we work for a long period of time with a family and we can't get that risk level down and we can't say that it's safe any longer for those children to be with their parents, then we have to seek court intervention as well and remove children from their home. So that's how they end up in foster care. And it can be anything from substance use to unsanitary living conditions, severe physical abuse, sexual abuse, chronic neglect, medical neglect, dental neglect, failing to protect your children from people you know will harm them. There's so many things. There's just such large umbrellas of reasons children come into care. Am I answering your question? Am I over-answering your question?
We're heading in the right direction. So basically the one reason is because of the home that they're in, they're at risk.
That's right. That's correct.
And that's the only way kids get put into this system.
Yes. Sometimes, I will say the home environment might not be risky, but the parents say we're done taking care of this child for whatever reason. And so sometimes we have people that, families that maybe they're having some delinquency issues in the home, maybe they're aggressive at home and they don't feel like they can keep themselves safe or their children safe, and so we've had those situations present as well. It just depends. Lots of reasons, but all around abuse and neglect in some way. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. I'll have another question when you get towards the end of your report here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Commissioner Shotwell had a question.
Okay, over here.
How many of the kids that are in foster care in Jackson County are Jackson County kids versus kids that have been brought into Jackson County from other counties for either emergency or urgent foster care situations?
Those 350, let's say that, children that I'm talking about are residents of Jackson County.
I understand they're residents, but I know we get a lot of Wayne County kids, and I know that we get a lot of other county kids move to Jackson because we do have a good support structure here for foster care children, because I see them regularly. That's why I'm asking the question, and I know that they're out county. They're not counted in that number?
I guess, and I hope I'm not misunderstanding your question. So, we have families that are, I don't know if they're coming in from, are you saying they moved from Wayne County? They moved their residence here?
I'm saying from another county, kids are being moved into Jackson in emergency situations for foster care.
For placement, no. These 350 kids are just Jackson County kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotcha. Thank you. Okay, anything else on that? You want me to move on? Okay. Okay, so universal caseloads, you're probably aware we've been about a year now. We started in August of 2018 for universal caseloads. There haven't been any other counties that have gone up for our universal caseload, so it's not going well, and so they're not taking any counties back into universal caseloads until we work out the kinks. So basically, we're still struggling with clients having long waits and some difficulty with their cases in some way, shape, or form. And so we're trying as hard as we can and working very diligently to get those issues resolved. We have had some support from staff from various counties that are not currently in universal caseloads to assist, and that has been very helpful. But what we're finding is that to make this system work the way that it was intended or designed, staffing isn't there. And so that's become a barrier for the success of this particular endeavor. So we'll stay tuned for what's coming up around that. There hasn't been any significant decision made to take away universal caseloads and go back to the traditional caseload managing system, but we are still having some difficulties around that. YouthNet, so that continues, that work continues. We are at the point in our work with YouthNet, which is interventions to reduce the number of children that are on track for either residential care or are currently experiencing a residential setting in foster care. Those children that we're focused on are 10 years of age or older, involved in the court delinquency system or on probation, and children who potentially are at the youth home as well. So we're starting our strategy work and hope to see a change in the numbers within the next 12 months to see some reduction in children that are in residential care. We've started some boots on the ground interventions, I would say, to try to make an impact in this number. And then attached is the whole list of community meetings and events that Zoe attends, or that somebody from our department attends, and you have that for your review. So I'll ask for any additional questions now, if there are any from the commissioners.
Commissioner Bear?
This list of community meetings, I'm not familiar with some of these. Can you tell me what the Handle with Care monthly meeting is?
Sure. Handle with Care is a trauma intervention for our kids that involves law enforcement, the school districts, and, well, really it involves those two. But I'll tell you that Zoe rolled this out here. She went to, and I can't think of which state she went to, I want to say it was North Carolina, but I don't think that's right. But they currently, or they have had this in place for a long time. So she went out there and took a team of people with her to see what this Handle with Care was all about. And really what it entails is whenever there is law enforcement involvement at a home, so let's say there's a domestic violence situation that occurs on a Tuesday night, and law enforcement responds to the home and there are children there that are part of that episode, either part of the domestic violence episode or they're watching the police come in as a response to that, that's considered something that could be potentially traumatizing to a child. So the law enforcement then gets information about where they attend school, and we have a system set up where law enforcement will then email the school and say, there's no details that are shared with the school. All they say is, Johnny Smith, Handle with Care. So then the interventions from the school district that day are sensitive in nature, trauma-informed in nature, so that some of the behaviors that a child might be experiencing, the school knows what has happened the night before, so that they handle those with kid gloves, for lack of a better term. Instead of punishing Johnny for the behavior or the outbursts in class, their approach to managing those behaviors might be a little bit different. So it's been a huge success here in all of our districts. And Zoe has taken her show on the road. In a sense, she's been to multiple counties, other states. She's all over rolling this out and helping other folks implement this in their places as well. So it's been a huge success.
Okay, the ACE training?
ACE training, Adverse Childhood Experiences. That is, in a nutshell, it's a huge explanation, but I'll try to keep it brief. Experiences that children, things that happen to children that they experience throughout their childhood. There's 10 of them that are significant enough to be called adverse childhood experiences. And what that does then is actually changes your brain chemistry. And so ACEs is speaking and educating the public on what adverse childhood experiences are. And it's another trauma-informed approach to dealing with people who have had these experiences and what that looks like when it presents themselves and when it presents itself in front of you. So somebody appearing at our front desk that is belligerent or aggressive, and instead of having what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you, if I can draw that picture. But there's lots of information, and it's a large presentation, extremely interesting, and we have them monthly. If you're interested in attending one there, it's excellent. But it shapes people, and just as we know that, childhood affects how we are as adults and how we function in life, and it's educating the public about what that truly looks like and the research behind it. I can tell you this started with a couple doctors that were looking at obesity, and they were asking questions about weight loss, and this is, I don't know if it was in the 70s, not exactly sure the decade that it started. I couldn't find that out for you, but what triggered this from starting is that they had successful weight loss patients, and when they went back to ask them when they started gaining the weight again, they would have these patients who have lost 100 pounds and then they would gain all the weight back. And when they got to ask them about questions around when was your first, and I'll just be frank, your first sexual experience, and the response started to be when I was 4, when I was 6, at which they were surprised by. But that started this research, that started this this whole thing with adverse childhood experiences. So just to give you an idea of I'm way over explaining everything. So sorry.
Oh, it's okay, you can.
Is it enough?
That's enough on that one.
Okay. I'm full of sunshine and roses over here.
The wraparound? What's the wraparound?
Yeah, wraparound is it's a team approach. It's a community-based approach, and Lifeways is very involved in wraparound and has been for years. So this has been in existence for many, many years, my whole career here. And it's really just it's a team of people that surround a family or a child and have interventions from a team level. It's wraparound. It's just what you think. It's like wrapping your arms around a family and having team-based decisions based on what's most effective for this family, and having the family participate in their own, I say service plan for lack of a better term there. So it's extremely helpful. Wraparound are really high-risk families too. Risk of, could be lots of things, could be risk for mental health, breakdowns, for residential placement, for removal from the home, it could be anything. But it's a community-based approach to wrapping around a family.
Okay. I was asking those other questions leading up to, on the next category, the meetings, the Fun Fest for foster parent recruitment and retention. And I ask because my youngest child, my daughter, she's just off to college now. And before she left, she was suggesting to me, Dad, why don't you look into being a foster parent? I don't know what a foster parent needs. I don't know if I have the skills to do it.
You do.
When do these
Sure you do.
meetings, when do these meetings happen that I could maybe attend one and just learn more?
Well, so I would be able to get your information. This is how we would start. I would get your information from you, and I would connect you with one of our licensing staff, and they do an orientation with you. And that's where you really kind of see if it's something that you would be interested in, and they go over what that looks like and what you could expect. But there isn't, you'll get into a meeting in a group setting down the road a little bit when you make a decision to start the process. But there is an orientation that takes place with just you or whomever it is that's making the decision to become licensed. And that's just
Licensed?
yeah, licensed. You have to be you have to have a license to foster, yeah, which is a process, but we would love to have you today if you're interested. Tomorrow's fine too, anytime this week.
I'd certainly like to learn more about it.
Great. Well, we'd love to have you. So I can get your information from, Deborah, I could probably get it from you too. I see her a lot. If you want to pass that along, or I can leave my information with her and you can connect with me and I'll get you hooked up.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Commissioner Williams had a quick question.
I don't have a question, but I do have, I guess, just a comment for commissioners. I do attend many of these meetings, schedule permitting, so if you have any other questions on any of these other organizations, I can also help with just pointing you in the right direction and getting you information on any of those. And then also to just thank you for your work. You've
Sure.
done a great job, and we've worked together a little
Lots
bit
of
over the
times,
years. And so
yes.
just thank you for your work
Yeah.
and your time today.
You're welcome. Your explanations may be shorter than mine too, so if you're looking for a time saver, he might be a little bit more effective. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. Any more questions?
Oh, thank you very much,
You're
Jackie.
welcome, you're welcome.
Moving right along to item 4E, I believe Destiny's going to come give us a report on the medical care facility.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Okay, so I'm just going to start off with finance. So last time I reported out, May's financials were not yet ready. So May's financials showed a net gain of $28,000, which was better than budget by $407,000. As we were budgeted for a net loss of $379,000 for the month of May. This is mainly attributed to high census with an average monthly census of 186, which was 4.84 beds over budget. On the graphs that was attached in my report, I also made a green line on all the graphs for what the budgeted census is, so you can kind of see where the trend line goes. So for May, we had 35 admissions and 41 discharges, with a total average of 185, census of 185.84. For June, we had a net loss of $115,000, which is below budget by $101,000, as we were budgeted for a net loss of $14,000 for the month of June. This is mainly attributed to higher than budgeted expenses in the area of nursing wages. This can be particularly attributed to overtime and the need for some additional one-to-one care for multiple residents during the month of June. And you'll also see that that carries into July as well. Census averaged 183, which is 1.97 beds above budget. However, the case mix was lacking for the budgeted amount, as we didn't have as many private pay residents as we had in the previous month, causing the revenue to be a little less than what we would have liked to see. So for June, we had 34 admissions and 33 discharges with an average census of 182.97. July shows a net loss of $140,000. This is below budget by $172,000, as we budgeted for a net gain of $32,000 for the month of July. Again, this is mainly attributed to the higher than usual nursing wages, having to do with overtime and the one-to-one care for multiple residents. So at one point, we had 3 residents that required one-to-one care. So when you look at that for 3 shifts, 3 residents, you're talking about 9 CNAs right there. That adds to the overall expenses. The average census for July was 186, which was 5 beds above budget. But again, the case mix was lacking. We did see a higher revenue in the area of Medicaid, but it's a lower payer source than Medicare and managed care. So that is one of the things that we're working on in August. One of the things I wanted to note on the graph for July, going into the graph for August, you'll see a purple box there and a red box. So that purple box outlines the potential denial of payment period that we had due to an annual survey, and the red box outlines what was actually a denial of payment period, which was 4 days, versus the potential for 16 days. So August financials are not yet available, but you can also see the trend line for the year-to-date. And so our year-to-date admissions, we've had 302 total admissions, 284 total discharges with an average census of 177.03. One thing I would like to note is this number of admissions and discharges is more than we had for the total of last year. So we've already, and we're looking at this as of August. So I would say that it's pretty decent to estimate that we'll probably have 100 more admissions than we did last year, which is good for census. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is we have had our Medicaid audit for 2016, and 2017 was just completed last week, and our cost report for 2018's Medicare and Medicaid cost reports were submitted timely. Any questions on the finance section?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I saw two consecutive months of overtime being an issue.
Yes.
Are we short personnel to the fact that we're having to regularly schedule overtime? Is it that we have a lack of nurses? Is that part of the issue?
It's actually in CNA wages,
Okay.
more than nurses. And we've actually, because of the acuity of the residents that we've been taking lately, we've had to up the number of CNAs that we've needed on each shift. And we worked that into the budget. But what we didn't work into the budget was to meet that number. At some points, we have more overtime than what we had worked into the amended budget, which is what we're seeing here. And those one-to-one scenarios where a resident needed one-to-one care, we didn't have any way to guess that from the budget, or from a budgetary standpoint. So that's something we're going to work on going into 2020's budget, is try and build in a little extra flexibility for that, because we haven't had the need to have one-to-one care very often over the last couple of years, but just recently we've had several people that had very in-depth needs. if that
So
makes sense.
in your opinion, we're sufficiently staffed then?
Yes.
Okay.
But there is some overtime to meet that. But if you look at, I didn't put page numbers on your report. But if you get past all of the service anniversary information, I did include a grid that's labeled CNA call-in and mandation totals. If you have it printed in color, it'll be orange and blue, and nurse call-in and mandation totals. So if you look, you'll see that just this last, okay, so let's look at 7/8 to 7/21. We had 47 CNA call-ins for that pay period and only 1 mandation. But one of the things that we do is we do offer some incentive for people to pick up shifts before it gets to a mandation situation. So there is some overtime there, but we're not mandating much for overtime, if that makes sense. Any other questions on that? Okay. In the people section, We we were in need of a new HR director, so we just had our new HR director start last month, and so she's getting the lay of the land. And our social work and activities director is retiring this month, and our maintenance director is retiring next month. So we're in the process of interviewing candidates for those two positions. Well, it'll be 3 positions, because social work and activities will be splitting into 2 separate positions. But that's a pretty large change in the leadership. So looking from last January 2018 to now, we will only have 2 core leaders that were in place. So that's something that we're really trying to pay attention to make sure that quality doesn't fail because of the turnover in leadership. I will mention that M&A did have an outstanding arbitration case that has since been settled. We will not need to go to arbitration for that. It had to do with a discipline for a nurse. For 2098A, there is one outstanding grievance involving the equity of discipline. And for 139, which is our CNAs and all of our service line staff, there is no open grievances at this time, but one potential arbitration for a termination. They have asked for a 60-day extension on that, which generally means that they won't pursue, but we won't know that for sure until October. Any questions on the people section? Okay. And then just to go into quality, we did have 2 surveys during this last quarter. One was a facility reported incident and complaint survey, so it had to do with incidences that we reported to the state and then also a complaint that they received. During that survey, we received 2 citations, one at a G level and one at a D level. The following week, the state survey came in for our annual survey. During that survey, we received 10 citations. 7 of those were a level D citation and 3 of those were a level E citation. And this is probably one of the better surveys that we've had over the last 5 years, so that was quite exciting to us. We also had the fire marshal came in and had a few concerns that were taken care of quickly, and he had been back for resurvey in late July. Part of that denial of payment piece that I talked to you guys about with the census comes from the survey. So because we had a G-level citation in that facility reported incident survey, there are certain immediate penalties that go into effect. So in the past, that would have been a fine, but this year it was denial of payment within 45 days of the exit of survey, and that has to do with the history of G citations that the facility has had over the last 3 years. That determines that timeline. So July 29th was the date that we were going into denial of payment, so we didn't take any new admissions between that time and the time that the state came to clear that citations. And that is all I have on quality. I will just mention a few things on growth before any other questions you might have. We are working towards educating all of our team for the change October 1st in how Medicare pays us from going from a RUGS-based payment system to what's called PDPM, the patient-driven payment model, which takes the focus off of therapy services and puts it on the overall acuity of each resident, which will actually, looks like that will be more beneficial for us because we do take higher acuity residents. We have a training campaign plan for our CNAs, focusing on making sure that the care plans are followed, also including some information about the new oversight that CNAs have in their certification and how the state is looking at that. We also had a change in our therapy company. One of the things that we've been doing to look at expenses is as any contract comes up, we're getting 3 separate bids. So we did change our therapy contract, which is a pretty big change for us. We've had the same therapy company for 12 years. So that change will go into place October 1st as well. And I think that's all I have to report. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4F, Department of Aging Monthly Report from Marcy.
Good afternoon. I'll just briefly mention items on the Department on Aging monthly report. We had a caregiver conference where we had speakers come and speak with family caregivers. We had 23 people attending. And this is the time of year we're approaching Medicare annual enrollment, so anyone with a Medicare Part D drug plan needs to review their plan on Medicare.gov because the plans normally change each year, and your costs could go up unless you check that out. And a reminder that if you know anyone approaching age 65, please encourage them to call the Department on Aging for an appointment to talk about Medicare and what that involves and any supplemental insurance, Part D, drug plans, things like that. And people do need to call for an appointment. We can't take walk-ins because in essence they're jumping the line from the other people who have already called and made an appointment. So we need people to please call in. Have not heard back yet for the 14 grant proposals we submitted to Region 2 Area Agency on Aging, but the board meets September 19th, so I expect that we'll hear information after that point for the grant year that begins October 1st. There's a mini grant opportunity for funds to assist people to completing their Census 2020 survey, which this is the first time it'll be done online. So we plan to submit an application for 2 tablets to help, especially our homebound older adults, help walk them through how to submit their survey, as well as go to different senior sites with the tablets and help them fill it out. And then with our 2020 budget, we do have some program changes because we will not receive general funds in 2020. So I have a list there of some of the things that we will change. We'll stop having special diets unless we can bill it to a Medicaid program. Reduced respite hours. We won't do snow removal or lawn mowing. And then some other items. We plan to go to an ad-based publication for our newsletter so that we don't have to pay for printing. And this leads me to senior millage revenue will expire. We'll use the last of the revenue in 2020, so the renewal needs, if the commissioners want to continue senior millage, it will need to be on a ballot in 2020. And I'm looking at numbers as far as our being able to continue services we're currently providing. And we won't be able to do what we are doing currently if we continue with the .25 mils. We would have to make several more cuts. So I'll come back to the commissioners and talk more about senior millage and my recommendation for what level we should request. Any questions about that?
Commissioner questions? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh,
Just real quick, just so that I have the best understanding, if in the event that the millage is discontinued, would that wipe out your entire budget?
Yes.
Okay.
We would probably, with grants, be able to provide Meals on Wheels, and that would be it.
Oh, wow.
Meals on
Okay.
Wheels and the in-home assessments connected with that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
But no, yeah, it would be different. Okay.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4G, MSU Extension Semi-Annual Report from Matt.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I have a couple of my colleagues that will share some information with you shortly as well, but just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to present some of the highlights from MSU Extension for the last few months. Wanted to start with something that happened fairly recently. Our state director, Dr. Jeff Dwyer, has been working throughout the summer to tour the entire state of Michigan and hear a little bit more about what's happening in Extension around the state and see some things firsthand. So we had the opportunity to host him here a couple of weeks ago in District 12, which includes Jackson County. And so we had some opportunities for him to see some of the work going on in Jackson County here as well. So one of the things that Jeff has is this podcast called Partnerships and Peninsulas that he records with some of our partners. So Jim Seitz sat down with him and recorded some of the work that he's doing on the Grand River watershed and some other things happening in this area. Also worked with another one of our partners to do that. But we also held a meeting at the Rogers Reserve, the Chestnut and Pawpaw Farm here in Jackson County. So we had our District Advisory Council meeting that evening, had some other constituents able to come and meet with Jeff as well, so some of our staff, hear a little bit more about that facility and talk a little bit about what's going on in Extension from his perspective. So it was a good opportunity. Also, he came to one of our programming sites that Angela does some work at for nutrition programming. She can talk maybe a little bit more about that as well. And then also had an opportunity for him to be on JTV with Bart Hawley on his program and talk a little bit about Extension there also. So Jackson was definitely highlighted as a part of his tour. He spent quite a bit of time here. Also, I almost forgot, we met with Phil McCaskey, our Veterans Affairs Director in Jackson, also to talk about some of the potential opportunities that we have in Extension to expand some work with veterans and some of the programming that we're doing and looking for ways that we can find some partnership dollars to be able to do that. So looking to expand the work that we're doing there as well. Additionally, this spring obviously was a very challenging time for anybody trying to grow anything outdoors or do much of anything outdoors, actually. So Extension put together through our agricultural team, so a lot of work and research on prevented and delayed planting. And also you can see the next heading there is managing farm stress. So we still have some ongoing programs related to farm stress management that we're working on putting together, and we have some curricula and some materials available for producers that are experiencing that stress and can help them with that, but also the delayed planting resources, and now have kind of worked into fall management of ground that was open this spring and what could happen there. So there's some resources available for that. In partnership with Farm Bureau, we held a delayed prevented planting meeting in Lenawee County for producers specifically targeted at livestock growers, which Jackson County is definitely impacted by that. So those invitations went out through the Farm Bureau network. We had a little over 110 growers in participation of that meeting, talking about prevented planting, forage management for livestock farms, and how to continue to provide feed for those animals in light of the fact that the traditional crops weren't going to be planted in the spring. So we're still working on some follow-ups to that. Another program that's upcoming, we've talked to you about this a little bit before, but just to highlight that we're still working on this topic area, is emergency response to accidents involving livestock. So with 94 running through the county here, there is a lot of livestock that travel up and down that road. And so response to those accidents is really important. There's been some, recently in the news, there's been some accidents with livestock haulers in southern Michigan, so it's something we want to continue to work on. And also, we found out that Jackson County Farm Bureau is going to sponsor 2 individuals per township in the county that want to attend this training. So if you know of anybody in the townships that you represent that might be interested in this, you can check and see if those township slots have been taken. But Farm Bureau is willing to sponsor those individuals so that they don't have to pay the fee to attend this course. But we're really excited about continuing with this training. And then also, we had provided some information related to the fact that in Jackson County this year, we had swine flu with the pigs at the fair. It's not uncommon to have that at some fairs, so we're still working on statewide strategies to deal with that. But as related to that, Fowlerville Fair in Livingston County also had that in my district this year. So there is a conference that's been put together at the request of the State Department of Health and Human Services, looking at educating youth and adults about swine influenza and other zoonotic diseases. And our constituents and our partners from Livingston County are actually on the panels to be part of those discussions. But Andrew Bowman from Ohio State University has been collecting some air quality data at some of the county fairs, including Jackson, over the last few years. Also collecting some swabs from pigs as well to kind of run some parallel research on swine flu and how that impacts what we're doing at the fairs and such. So should be an interesting conference coming up later this week. I think there's still some spots available if anybody's interested in attending. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Angela for a minute to talk about some of our health and nutrition programs, and then Brittany will wrap up with 4-H. But if you have a question, I'd be happy to take it.
Yeah, just one question on the sponsored meeting for September 23rd.
Yes.
Who would they get in contact with? Should I each meet someone in my township that wanted to
You can
do
have
that?
them contact our office, and we can put them in touch with the right people at Farm Bureau, or they can call the County Farm Bureau office directly.
Can you give me a phone number? I can just,
Off the top of my head, I don't have the Farm Bureau number, but our office number is 788-4292.
and who would they ask for?
You could talk to Tom Guthrie. Tom Guthrie,
Guthrie.
yes.
Thank you.
He can put you in touch with the right people.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other questions for my part? All right, thanks again for your time, Angela.
Just had a couple photos from my classes most recently. I always try to incorporate a hands-on cooking skill to my health and nutrition classes. So we had some fun making smoothies and salsa and a bunch of other different items. I just wanted to highlight a couple partnerships that we've really been honing this year. So the Jackson Area Recovery Community is one that I've worked with. And actually this is who our director, Jeff Dwyer, visited with us and talked to Aaron there. But we want to try to emphasize health and taking care of yourself, your body and mind to those with substance abuse disorder. So I occasionally go to their bistro hours in the morning. They have coffee hours. We do have ongoing classes there throughout the year. I write an article for their newsletter that goes out quarterly. And these are all at the home of New Vision, right off Michigan Avenue down the street. We also have some community mental health partnerships, most recently with J-Town Clubhouse. They just moved to a new location. They have a full kitchen because the facility used to be a restaurant there. So I actually was teaching some of the folks how to use the industrial kitchen equipment because they really want people to get some more work skills, some hands-on skills for when they're reacclimating into the work environment. A lot of these people haven't had a job or worked in a while, so perhaps they could have a new interest sparked in food service or cooking or being a chef of some sort, and then also having those skills to do that. These also help with life skills for independent living. A lot of folks with mental health issues in the past might not have lived independently recently. And additionally, these really help with just having social events to decrease depression, loneliness, and such. So I'm really happy and proud about the community mental health partnerships that we are fostering around town. Lifeways as well. Right now, we're hosting one at our office with Lifeways, but I do also go to their facility, and they're building a kitchen right now as we speak, so I can use that after the new year for classes. Our fiscal year ends September 30th, so won't have too much change between now and then, but I've had over 50 classes and presentations around the county, nearly 700 participants reached, and an estimated 6,700 others around the county reached, either through newsletters that were sent home. The articles I've written was mentioned in a couple podcasts, resource fairs. Tend to go to a lot of the health resource fairs if I can, and school-wide initiatives. So, this is a program that my coworker Andrea does. So she does specific nutrition programs like Dining with Diabetes. Because of the Lions Club grant this year, she is able to put on the Dining with Diabetes program for free around several counties. Andrea actually covers 6 counties technically, although I know she's been in more recently, so she's very busy. So thanks to the Lions Club for this grant for Dining with Diabetes that she can do. It's 4 sessions, 2 hours, and she can pretty much host them anywhere around the county, similar to my programs. Hands-on cooking skills in this as well, and more in-depth carb counting and information for those who have diabetes or at risk, or those who are caregiving for somebody who does. Any questions for me before I turn it over to Brittany?
Thank you.
All right, so I get to talk about the fun stuff. Fair. So my name's Brittany. I'm the 4-H program coordinator for those of you who don't know me, but I'm here every time, so you probably are used to me. I actually selected a couple of photos because I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that we do the agricultural side. We have the kids showing their horses, but we also have a lot of public speaking opportunities for our kids, which is really cool. So the last program year, we had over 3,000 youth served, approximately 500 year-long members that are involved in a club somewhere within the county. But we also have done a monthly workshop series for our Clover Bud members. Those are 5 to 8-year-olds, and they are kind of getting into 4-H, but we want to give them some of those life skills and some of those project skills as well. We've also expanded our workshops and clinics. If you guys remember from our last discussion, I actually had filled out a grant and gotten funding for a part-time program assistant. And so actually Jessica has done an amazing job of expanding those opportunities for not only our members, but also expanding into other parts of the county. We're expanding our scholarships. I feel like we've added a couple every year since I've been here, which has been really awesome. Our most recent one is actually the Gail Todd Memorial 4-H Volunteer of the Year. An incredibly long title, but a really great opportunity for one of our 4-H members. Three of our 4-H members, it's a scholarship of $700, then a $500, and a $300 scholarship for a 4-H member who volunteers their time to the project and to their community. Our Exploration Days participation has increased this year, and we did the Jackson Junior Welfare League grant this last year, and we're actually just now kind of getting into the swing of using that money for our outreach program. So we're developing new partnerships with local businesses such as Cake Connections to do cake decorating workshops and schools to do after-school programming. So we're just getting into that, and I'm actually really excited about this next year because with having Jessica on board, I think it's going to make our program just so much larger. So I'm always open to new partnerships if you guys have ideas. Areas of need that you think that kids might be interested in, we're more than happy to entertain those. So that's actually all that I had. I try to keep it short for you. I might be between you guys and lunch. So are there any questions about 4-H or extension in general?
Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks, guys.
So we will be moving on to item 4H, which I believe is a budget amendment request for the Health Department. And I think Cecilia is going to give us a briefing on that.
So, good afternoon. So yes, we do have a budget amendment in front of you for your approval. It's approximately an increase or decrease to revenue and expenditure of probably about $48,000. And it's basically just due to various grant funding and estimate changes. It's just our year-end amendment that we present every year. And the detail is attached if you interested in the different departments that are affected. Are there any questions?
Basically, it's a net decrease.
Yes.
Is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah,
$48,000?
it's a net decrease of revenue and expenditure of $48,000.
Okay. I need a motion to move that on to the board for approval. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passes.
Okay.
Moving on to item 4I, an environmental health division fee increase. Don.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Before you is a staff report that's been a long way in the making. Just to give you a little bit of history, we are looking to have you recommend and move to the full board recommended fee increases for the Environmental Health Division. Other than last year's 2% COLA increase on some of the programs, we haven't had a fee increase since the 2008 budget year, which was the fourth year of a stepped increase from the previous administration back in 2004. At any rate, a little bit of the methodology, beginning in 2015, indirect cost was starting to be applied to our program. We kind of recognized this. We developed a program to collect information from all of my staff as to the time they actually spend in any given program, down to the hour. Over the course of time, we collected that data, and with that, we were able to come up with specific costs that each program cost us to provide to the public as well as the business community. In addition to that, we then looked at all our revenues that were coming in associated with each program. Sometimes we do get grants from the state of Michigan, the on-site sewage grant, the food program grant, as well as the Type 2 contract amount from the DEQ, which is now EGLE, as well as a water supply grant from DHHS. So some of those have to be prorated across several programs, which is somewhat of a feat in itself, but methodology was chosen on how to do that. So when it comes down to it, the report in front of you identifies in the first chart on page 2, essentially the programs that are being provided in a subsidized manner, i.e. we're not collecting enough revenue to actually pay for the program's actual costs. Over on the right-hand side, the ones that are actually in black, those are the ones that are actually paying for themselves. As you can see, we're about $200,000 in the red concerning our programs and the cost of providing them. The next page, on page 4, is the chart that just provides a synopsis of our fee increases that we're recommending. These fee increases are enough to generate enough income based upon the 2018 events for each of these programs to get about the 90% level for generating enough revenue to take care of those program deficits. The final recommendation is to accept these fee increases. We haven't, again, as I've mentioned before, we haven't had a real fee increase in 10 years. So I'll open it up to any specific questions that any member may have.
Any questions? Commissioner Barrow?
Here's your chart on page 2. Let's just take the top one. Temporary campgrounds, the number of hours spent and the revenue attributed. Is this the dollars that are charged cover strictly staff, or are there other costs rolled into that?
Yes, these costs represent the entire cost structure of the Environmental Health Division. So the time spent, that means that my sanitarians spent 18 hours conducting inspections, looking at the permits, making some phone calls, whatever may be included in that. And then what we did was we took the entire cost structure of the EH division, which includes 95% of my salary. It includes 100% of the 2 clerks' salaries, and then layered it on top of all the available hours that the sanitarians put into conducting the program activities.
Okay, thank you. A couple of your abbreviations on page 4, quarter way down, the FIA partial inspection, the FIA full inspection.
Yes, that's actually MDHHS. That's the Department of Health and Human Services. The FIA nomenclature is a relic of the past when it used to be called the Family Independence Agency. It has never actually been changed on the fee sheet, the name.
Okay, and then further down the page, the STFU plan review, what's the?
Those are essentially the food trucks that you see at festivals. Specialized transitory food unit, if I'm correct in that, but
okay.
Elephant ears, funnel cakes, things, barbecue sandwiches that you see at the festivals and stuff.
Thank
you. Yeah, the good stuff, yes.
Any other questions? Some of these are substantial, doubling.
Yes, I would agree with that. There are a few cases here where we did not jump the fee all the way to 100% of the deficit. Didn't feel it was fair to do that. If you look on page 4, up near the top of that chart, there are 3 new fees that we are proposing. At this point in time, let's take a look at that first one, the Type 2 administration fee. Right now, we don't charge any fees to the Type 2 water supplies. These are like your gas stations, your grocery stores, maybe an apartment complex out in the country that is not on municipal water. So they have a well. So at this point in time, other than a brand-new permit for a brand-new well, we don't charge any local fee at all. We just get a $42,000 contract from the environmental, the EGLE, DEQ, to administer that program. And it's heavily in deficit. So this is a yearly administration fee for the 215 supplies to kind of cut that deficit in half.
So that's going to be, who's going to pay that fee?
That would be the apartment owner or the gas station owner or the Type 2 supply owner.
Every
on a yearly
Type 2
basis.
supply owner in Jackson County?
Pardon?
Every Type 2 in Jackson County,
Yes.
every business?
Yeah, about 215 right now. And that number doesn't really fluctuate much. It might be, next year, it might be 213 if a couple small businesses go out. It might go up to 217 if a couple new small businesses or apartment complexes get built.
Okay.
But it's pretty consistent.
And the survey fee?
That is referring to these 215 supplies have to be surveyed by my sanitarian once every 5 years. So the amount generated is 20% of those 215 supplies on a yearly basis, being charged that $150 for my sanitarian to go out, review the plumbing. Look, it's an on-site survey, looking at the well site, looking at the plumbing, looking as well as anything else that may be on site.
And then the pool spas, just checking public pools, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Hotels.
that's a combination. That's a new fee. Currently, we just charge $125 per pool, $125 per spa, hot tub. Moving forward, we want to, if there's only a swimming pool to inspect, what we want to do is charge $225 for that site inspection. That happens. And then if there's a pool and a spa, like at a hotel, you often have both. Rather than charging $225 twice, we'd cut the fee down to $350. Give that business owner a break.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Going to move on to item 4.
Does this need to go to full?
Oh, excuse me, you're correct. Yes, I was almost moving on. Okay, can I get a motion to send this to the board?
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. Now we'll be moving on to item 4J, Health Department, Fifth Amendment for Medical Director Services from Rashmi.
Good afternoon. This is our agreement for, medical director for the health department. We have 2 medical directors that fulfill the 16-hour capacity that we need per accreditation requirements and per the public health code requirements. And Dr. Cortland Katayan had recently accepted the CEO position at JHN, which required him to move on. So we'll be pursuing a contract with Henry Ford to have Dr. Pamela Heckert, who we're very pleased that she comes from Oakland County as their previous medical director, so comes very well experienced. There is a $10 increase an hour in this contract, mainly for cost of living, as well as the fact that given it's a new individual and her expertise, we're able to cover that within our budget.
How many hours a week is she working?
So she'll be 8 hours a week, and then Dr. Michael Faust, who's already our co-medical director, will be 8 hours a week, so 16 total.
Any commissioner comments, questions? Okay, we entertain a motion to move this on to the full board.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Carries. Moving on to item 4K, Health Department Early On Services Agreements with the ISD.
Correct. So this is a contract that we've got with the ISD for our Early On program. It essentially services infants and children ages birth to 3 years of age and their families where they have developmental delays or disabilities that we're assisting them. We actually house the staff. ISD puts in a portion for the contract, and we put in a small portion for the contract. I do apologize for the delay that it's getting to you. I know it's a July 1st, or June 30th is when it expired. However, I was negotiating with the ISD to cover a larger portion of the contract and waiting for them to return that back to me.
Questions? Entertain a motion to present this to the full board.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. Moving on to item 4L, monthly report.
Great. There's a number of items here to report, but I'll try to keep it brief. Just a couple in the communicable disease area. We have one health advisory that we issued on August 23rd related to vaping, a vaping-associated pulmonary illness notice, and we sent this to healthcare providers. Just to note, we don't have cases here in Jackson County. However, we're just being vigilant in our surveillance efforts. Second one is related to the eastern equine encephalitis risk. There, again, no cases of human or horse cases in Jackson County at the present time, but we issued an advisory just to increase our surveillance and our prevention efforts. We also put information out on our Facebook and website pages is related to mosquito control.
I have a question on that.
Commissioner Bear?
The eastern equine encephalitis, this indicates that's a zoonotic disease?
It is. It's spread by mosquitoes, which infect the horses, and then they can also impact humans as well.
Okay. The vaccine my horses for that, I didn't know that humans were susceptible to it.
They are, yep.
Thank you.
Yes. In fact, the fatality rate is pretty high amongst horses, 80 to 90%, 30% in humans.
Wow.
30%.
So 3 out of 10 would die if they were on average.
Correct. But there's also, that's why we do a lot of the education and prevention on mosquito control and people wearing, longer sleeves, trying not to go outdoors during the time the mosquito activity is high, keeping water sources away, like where mosquitoes might be pooling in those areas. So we do a number of prevention activities in that regard.
Well, I was just, I found that a little alarming when I heard that. I did not realize, I was thinking, right up there with some other things the CDC talks about. And I was just curious as to how widespread is this? I mean, what?
Well, just to give you a frame of reference, over the last 10 years that health departments have been doing surveillance on this, we had 10 cases. They're investigating about 8 right now, mainly concentrated on the west side of the state. But, I am hopeful that as the cold time approaches that, this would be more not conducive to mosquitoes being around and a slower activity of that.
What about the south? It doesn't freeze them out. Mosquitoes are all year round.
It's pretty much like, as far as in the southern counties you're saying, or southern states. Sure. Yeah, I mean, there is a widespread activity, I think, across the nation. I mean, they're seeing some on the East Coast as well, Massachusetts, I think, most recently, in terms of the human cases. But, yeah, it's something that, we're hoping that there'll be a slowdown in activity here in our state anyway.
If I may add, it is a very rare disease to start off with. It is endemic in southwest Michigan. Massachusetts also has some regions that are where it's endemic. But when we say it's endemic, it's very rare. Most years we have no cases at all show up other than horses. And when we do have some human cases, you're usually talking about 1 or 2 or 3. Right now, I think they're investigating up to 6. So it's higher than average, but it's still very, very rare. So this is not to preclude you from going outside and taking care of activities. It's just a very rare. When someone does contract the triple E, it does have 30% fatality rate. Oh, you do have, yeah. No, there's no person to person. Yep.
Question though, before you sit down, Don? Specific mosquito, or is it almost endemic to all mosquitoes?
No, it is a specific mosquito or 2 species. I don't know what they are, to tell you the truth off the top of my head.
Okay.
I have to get that answer to you if you wish.
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea. Have you heard anything from the federal government on ag on chronic wasting of deer and the 2 deer herds that were culled this past spring?
I have not been specifically contacted on that. That's through the DNR statewide. I don't know anything about the feds dealing with it, tell you the truth. And locally, it seems to be in the DNR hunting regulations in that realm.
Well, it was done in the southern part of the county, and they took over 200 deer.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I did not hear about that.
Mr. Chair. Not to go far afield, but since Don's standing there, Don, tell us a little more, sorry Rashmi, just deviate for a minute here, about the problem with the Cozy trailer park, and is it our responsibility, is it the township, who is it?
Okay. I personally do not know all the answers to that as of yet. Mobile home parks are an interesting animal. We'll just leave it at that. LARA, Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Division of the State of Michigan, has regulatory authority over the majority of mobile home parks. The Eagle, DEQ, has regulatory authority over their sewage system if they're using like a individual packet treatment plant or a lagoon system. In this case, Cozy doesn't use that. They also have authority regulatory-wise for water supplies if they're using their own well. Depending on the number of units, anything over 14 mobile home units would be a type 1 supply, just like the city of Jackson. So that would come under Eagle if they had their own water supply. They don't. Okay, they're on municipal water as well, I do believe. But I do know they're on the Summit Township sewer system. The situation at Cozy is we have an individual who has been complaining about sewage backing up. He hasn't responded to my emails. We're not really sure where the problem lies. When it comes to mobile home parks, the demarcation line for responsibility is ground level. Anything below ground level is the responsibility of the park until it gets out to the municipal sewer system. Then it becomes Summit Townships, the municipalities, regulatory authority. Anything above ground level is the mobile home unit owner's responsibility to fix the plumbing, if you will. So that is one of those things that has been kind of going on. People don't seem to actually know where the problem really lies. I suspect it's somewhere underground with tree roots, something along those lines. It's an older park. But it's really going to take a lot of people coming together. Laura, I can make some phone calls into Laura. I can kind of get pretty high up in the chain to see if they can do anything. But I will tell you this, I didn't get much help with the other mobile home park in Napoleon Township a year ago, so, from Laura.
I'd appreciate if you could CC me on any email communication you do on that.
Okay.
That individual happens to live in my district, and he is calling and emailing me quite frequently, as most people would have their experience in that. So I do want to make sure that we're taking every action that we can. I know it's not our direct responsibility, but
When sewage ends up on the ground, it can become our
okay.
responsibility
At
because
this point,
then it becomes
it's inside the
eminent-
facility, though. It's
yeah,
inside its trailer.
We can force things to happen because it's an eminent public health hazard, and that's kind of where we can hang our hat and start, doing something underneath the public health code. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to other parts of the report, I'll just go through it real briefly. We did a number of community outreach activities. We held a teen expo, was held at the YMCA. We did hepatitis A vaccinations at the county jail sites, vaccinating approximately about 40 high-risk individuals. We also participated in the Pride Parade event by distributing clinic information, STD prevention, and condoms. We also did about 240 referrals through our Jackson Care Hub to a variety of health and human service agencies. In our WIC program, we did a number of activities to promote breastfeeding. The big Latch-On event that takes place at the hospital, we participated in that, as well as a event called Rock and Rest Station to provide a environment that's conducive to support breastfeeding. Over 40 moms attended that event. We've also done a number of Head Start Roundup collaborations to promote enrollment into Head Start. In other areas with tobacco reduction, we've done putting up signage as well as providing educational materials to businesses in the downtown area to promote smoking cessation. As well as we went on the Bart Holly show to promote tobacco and vaping, vape-free school year. So we did some education around that. As far as in our emergency preparedness area, our public information officer attended an all hazards incident management training for the PIOs, as well as attended a psychological first aid training here in Lansing. For our hearing and vision program, we screened about 110 kids that were screened during the months of July and August, so that was a pretty busy time for us in terms of working with Head Start, as well as getting kids ready for school. In our car seat program, for a combined total of, we did 38 car seats over the months of July and August. We inspected about 15 car seats, and then we provided about 54 car safety education sessions. So we continue to be in discussions with Henry Ford Allegiance to see if they can pursue taking up this program, given that we cut that from our budget. In our Healthy Communities report, just to let you know that Henry Ford is pursuing a grant as it relates to pursuing a mobile market on the south side of the city of Jackson in an effort to minimize the food deserts in that area. One area around the aging population that we did was a group called Elaine Circle of Trust. It was a planning team that worked together to meet the needs of about 37 disabled and or retired residents, where we helped to improve their social and emotional health and to keep them as part of the community rather than the isolation they may sometimes feel. We also, through our youth programs, we had a Talk Early, Talk Often workshop in which about 28 families attended, so that continues to be a pretty successful and pretty well-attended event. In our teen outreach program in fiscal year 2019, 12 clubs were served by this program, reaching over 130 alternative middle and high school youths. So the various schools that participated was Western Career Prep, East Jackson Way, Fort Street Learning Center, Wilson Academy, and Jackson High Pathways. Then finally, just to let you know, we had received a childhood lead exposure elimination grant that was specifically for pregnant women. And the intention was to see if lead rates were getting high amongst the pregnant population. We had about 36 patients who had lead tests ordered. 13 completed that testing. Of those who completed their testing, no one had an elevated blood level, meaning it was over 6 micrograms to deciliters. And 17 pregnant women declined the testing. So given that, the program ends August 30th. So we're pleased with the fact that at least promoted education as well as nutrition education. We'll continue to do that through other pieces of our program, such as WIC, and we'll continue to do the lead case management for children, of course. But we found, this program essentially didn't find that lead seems to be a high issue amongst the pregnant women population. So that concludes my report. One other piece that I've forgot to put in the report is that we are also pursuing a grant through the nonprofit network for the census, to do the census count. We're intending to possibly purchase some level of a kiosk or something that can help with traffic flow in our front lobby, as well as have a link to the census, so we're assuring that, people are counted. In addition, we'll probably look to having somebody who can work on a temporary basis to assure that, we're providing assistance face-to-face as well. So that concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to item 5A, claims from August 1st to the 31st, 2019. I'm looking for a motion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.